For question 1, the answer is either blood group A or blood group O, because both the father and mother may be heterozygous for blood group A, having the genotype IA small I and IA small I. So therefore, blood group O is possible. For question 2, the mother must have a genotype of small I. The father may have a genotype of IA small I. So blood group A is possible, blood group O is possible. Now both parents don't have any allele for IB, so therefore blood group B and blood group AB, it's impossible in their offsprings. Now for question 3, actually if you consider the father to have the genotype of IA small I and the mother have the genotype of IB small I, then actually their child have a lot of possibilities in their blood group. It can be blood group A if it's IA small I. It can be blood group B if it's IB small I. It can be blood group AB if it is IA IB inherited to their offsprings. And it can be blood group O if they receive a small I from each parent. So that's the answer for the first part. Now, coming up next, after understanding the inheritance of blood group in human, we also need to learn an idea called blood transfusion. To understand the idea behind transfusion, we need to understand that when we say ABO blood group, it is defined by the antigens present on the red blood cell. But if you remember what we talk about in immune system, our body crazily creates various type of B lymphocytes or B cells that produce antibodies, and they are educated not to attack our own self-antigens by killing those B cells that would produce antibodies against self-antigens. So, in a person with blood group A, those B cells that produce antibody against A would be killed. So, there won't be any antibody against antigen A in their body. But they may produce B cells that produce an antibody against antigen B. In such case, these cells won't be killed during the education process because those persons don't have antigen B. So, in a person with blood group A, their plasma would contain anti-B antibody. Similarly, in a person with blood group B, since they have antigen B on red blood cell, those B cells that produce anti-B antibody would be killed during the education. But those B cells that produce anti-A antibody can survive, so their plasma would contain anti-A antibody. Now I'd like to give you 1 minute to think about what type of antibodies would be present in the plasma. you can start drawing if you are quite confident with your answer. Okay, let's start with blood group AB. Now, since the red blood cell has both antigen A and antigen B on the surface, therefore the plasma won't have antibody against antigen A or antigen B. While for blood group O, there are no antigens A nor B on red blood cells, so the plasma would contain both the anti-A and anti-B antibody. The interactions between antibody and antigens play a significant role during blood transfusion. Now, I don't know whether you have any common sense or heard about anything about blood transfusion between different blood groups. So we will take two examples to study which type of blood can be donated to which type of person. Okay, so turn to the next page of the notes. The first thing to understand during blood transfusion is that this must involve two persons, right? One is giving blood, one is receiving blood. The one that is receiving blood is called recipient, while the person who donates blood is called donor. Sorry. So we're going to split this box in this way, and we're going to talk about two examples to illustrate under what situation can a donor donate blood to a recipient. So in case 1, let's imagine that both donor and recipient have the same blood type, in this case blood type A. Now obviously, by common sense, you know that this blood transfusion is possible. We have to consider what would happen during the transfusion. The first background knowledge that you need to know is that the antibodies in the donor's blood are removed before the blood is transfused. So in donor's blood, the main component to consider is the red blood cell. Now obviously, since this is blood group A, it has antigen A on its surface. While for the recipient, we have to consider whether their antibody would act on the antigens in donor's blood. Since the recipient has blood group A, so they won't have anti-A antibody, otherwise they will kill themselves, right? Their blood would only contain anti-B antibody. In this way, it's safe because the anti-B antibody would not bind onto the antigen A on the red blood cell of the donor's blood. No binding there. Okay. Let's consider a case 2 and see what would happen if the antibody and the antigen react. In this case, let's consider a recipient and a donor with unmatching blood types. In this case, let's say it has blood group B, the recipient has blood group B, while the donor has blood group A. Now, once again, for the donor, we consider the antigen on the red blood cell, so that there is antigen A on the antibody. But here, the recipient has blood group B, so they have anti-A antibody in their plasma. So what will happen next? Obviously, the antibody would bind onto the antigen. In this case, the anti-A antibody in the recipient's blood would bind onto the antigen A on the donor's blood, on the red blood cell of the donor's blood. This would cause two possible outcomes. So either this antibody, like what we have learned in the chapter about body defense, would clump the red blood cells together after binding. Now don't underestimate these clumps. Once these red blood cells are clumped together, they form a solid mass, and these solid mass would quickly block capillaries in our body. So for those capillaries in the brain, in vital organs, when they're blocked, you can imagine how they damage the vital organs and quickly cause trouble and even death. So one of the possible outcomes is clumping of the red blood cells, which may block capillaries. While another possibility is that the antibody may directly break down the red blood cell, a phenomenon called hemolysis, that is breakdown of the red blood cell. So, in this case, these blood transfusion between blood group A and B is not safe. So there is one question then. Now obviously if the blood group is the same, the blood transfusion is safe. Does it mean that the blood transfusion can only occur between blood groups of the same blood type? You can think about it first. If you have any idea, that's good. Talk with your neighbor. If you don't, if you're not sure, you can start doing question A first, and then we would come back and talk about that question. Remember, what we learn in these two cases is that if you are considering whether a blood transfusion is safe or not, you consider the antibody in the recipient and the antigen on the donor. So that's the rule in these stories. No matter what blood group you are considering, recipient, you only consider the antibody. For the donor, you only consider the antigen because the antibodies are removed. To start doing the classwork here, you have I think 5 minutes or less would be definitely enough, and you have finished early. You can start by thinking, what is it a must for the donor and the recipient to have the same blood type? If not, then can you set up a table to talk about every possible cases? Now let's check the answer. For 1, of course, it is appropriate because the blood group is the same, so there is not much to consider there. For blood group A and B, we have talked about it, is not appropriate. And here, we say the two blood group doesn't match here. Now, can blood type O receive blood of blood type A? Again, focus on the rule that we talked about just now, that for recipient, we always consider the antibody, and for donor, we consider antigen. So blood group O contains anti-A antibody and anti-B antibody. So that means when the blood group A, which contain antigen A, when those red blood cell enters blood group O, these antibodies would bind onto these antigen and cause trouble. So therefore, this blood transfusion is not safe. But if the blood group is reversed, don't just think that this is another no. Don't think that O and A is always having the same answer, because once the role is reversed, the consideration changes. Now, since the donor has blood group O, we no longer consider the antibodies present in blood group O. Instead, we consider their red blood cell. And amazingly, for blood group O, there's no antigen A or B on their red blood cells. So therefore, even the recipient contains anti-B antibody, they can't bind onto the donor's red blood cell. Once there's no binding, this blood transfusion is safe. So blood group O can donate blood to blood group A. So we're going to go a little bit quicker here. Recipient having blood group AB contains no anti-A or B. So now even the donor's blood, which is blood group B, contains antigen B. There's no reaction because there's no anti-A or anti-B at all in blood group AB. So therefore, this is safe. But once the role is reversed, you can see that the situation differs, because now for the blood group AB, we don't consider the antibody, we consider the antigen, because now they are the donor. So their red blood cell contains antigen A and antigen B, while the recipient having blood group B contains anti-A antibody. In this way, the anti-A would bind onto the antigen A on the red blood cell. So therefore, this is not a safe blood transfusion. So let's think about those questions again. First, for a safe blood transfusion, is it always necessary to have the same blood group between donor and recipient? The answer is no, because if you look at case 4 and case 5, these cases they have different blood group, so that but still the blood transfusion is safe. So we say that blood transfusion is safe if the blood group of donor and recipient, if you say are the same, then it's wrong. It need not to be the same, right? We say their blood, if the blood group of donor and recipient matches, or in the textbook it used the word are compatible with A, sorry, compatible. So this answers the first question. The second question is, alright, is there further rules or special occasions in blood transfusion? My hint is consider case 4 and case 5 again and see how blood group O and blood group AB is special in this way. Now, I would like to give you two minutes to think about it with your partner. What's so special about blood group blood group O and blood group AB in this case, and what can you imply or what can you deduce? What's so special about blood group O during blood transfusion? What's so special about blood group AB during blood transfusion? Think about it. If you have any idea, put it here, somewhere here, using pencil. Alright, so let's put the answer in the box above. What's so special about blood group O is that blood group O it doesn't have any antigen on its red blood cell. Now because of this, imagine it now acts as a donor. No matter what antibody is present in the recipient, it doesn't matter anymore because there's no antigen at all on the red blood cell, so there will be no immune response here. So therefore, blood group O can donate blood to any recipient. In this way, we say people with blood group O are universal donor. In the opposite, if you consider blood group AB, the situation is different. Sorry, one more to add up is that although blood group O is universal donor, since it contains antibody, both antibody A and B, it's not universal recipient. In reverse, since it contains both anti-A, anti-B antibody, it can only receive blood from blood group O. So think of blood group people with blood group O is a super kind person, but it's a poor one because they can only benefit others, but they cannot gain other benefits from AB or AB group. Well, blood group AB is in reverse. It seems to be selfish because if you think carefully, this property of blood group AB is that it doesn't contain any anti-A or anti-B antibody. So therefore, no matter what kind of red blood cell is donated into their blood, they won't have any immune response like this. So therefore, they can receive blood of any blood type. So therefore, we call them universal recipient. Again, if you reverse the role, it doesn't work. If blood group AB is going to be a donor, it will be in big trouble because their red blood cells contain both antigen A and antigen B. So people with blood group AB can only donate blood to also blood group AB. So therefore I say they're a little bit selfish, right? So just an analogy, but it's not really selfish, alright? So now you understand these stories. I hope you go home and do question B here. I'll put up some hint or guidelines after today, so you can check your answer when you want to. Okay, that's all. So remember, in blood transfusion, recipient you only consider antibody. For donor, you only consider the antigen because their antibodies in the donated blood are removed. Once they do not have any immune response, the blood transfusion is safe, and we say the blood types are matched. If the antibody of the recipient binds onto the donor's red blood cell, the red blood cell would either clump or break down. So therefore, it's not, the blood transfusion is not safe, and those blood groups are not matched. And now you also understand one more thing, why blood group O is especially valuable in these blood transfusion situations.